not all bad.
People say to me, you always seem to be having a good time. And you know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I'm John Dickerson. Join me for the Daily Report, weekdays on CBS News 24/7.
Okay, let's go. You guys good?
Hey.
All right, we good?
Keep going.
The clock, it's ticking.
Off we go.
60 minutes.
60 minutes.
60 minutes.
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS.
The party should stand up, stand behind him, and stop all the rhetoric and backbiting about everyone jumping ship.
We've been Joe Biden supporters. He's a fantastic man, and he's done wonderful stuff, but it's time for him to leave.
We need a lasting just peace, and the only way to get there is to convince President Putin that he will not win on the battlefield.
Hello, I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. It is a pivotal week for President Biden as more Democrats call on him to step aside as the party's nominee. While these calls grow, more questions are being raised about why a Parkinson's expert visited the White House several times. The president fired back at his critics during a TV interview this morning.
I'm getting so frustrated by the elites. Now, I'm not talking about you guys, but about the elites in the party who they know so much more. But if any of these guys don't think I should run against me, go ahead, announce for president. Challenge me at the convention.
And our Ed O'Keefe and Scott McFarland join us now from the White House and Capitol Hill, respectively, which is where all the action is happening at this point. Ed, I want to start with you at the White House because we started the morning with the president releasing this statement, this letter essentially to House Democrats trying to quell the calls for him to step aside. Tell us a little bit about what the White House is saying, what Biden is saying, insisting that he's staying in this race.
There's a line deep in that letter that says, look, this has been going on now for a little more than a week. It's time to end it and move on to the rest of the campaign. And that, in essence, is the president, the first lady, and the White House's position, plus the reelection campaign. There's been discussion about this. He's not going anywhere. Let us, as a Democratic Party, he argues, move forward in defeating Donald Trump. And we'll see whether or not that works. But here it is on a late Monday afternoon when things start to happen in Washington, when Congress returns. And we're seeing a drip, drip, drip of statements from various congressional Democrats, senators and House Democrats, mostly saying either the president has to better demonstrate he's got the mettle to do this, or he's got to get out. I'll let Scott talk to that in a moment. There are other questions here at the White House today about the official operations of the presidency and how regarding his health. You mentioned this situation with a Parkinson's expert. His name is Dr. Kevin Kennard. He's based at the Walter Reed National Medical Center up in suburban Washington, Bethesda, Maryland. He has visited the White House at least 8 times over 8 months from last summer to this past spring. That's standard. There are medical professionals based here to treat the thousands of people who work here at the White House complex, the White House itself, the West Wing, the Executive Office Building. And there's the president's personal physician, a guy named Kevin O'Connor. This Parkinson's expert appears to have met at least 7 times with other medical personnel here at the White House, for whatever reason. He did meet at least once with Dr. O'Connor, the president's physician. And today we were asking, did that, just rule it out, or tell us you don't know quite yet, did that meeting have anything to do with the president? And as we can show you, the White House Press Secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, couldn't answer the question.
So every time he has a physical, he has had to see a neurologist. So that is answering that question.
No, it's not.
No, it is. It is. You're asking me.
Come to the White House.
But I also said to you, Ed, I also said to you, for security reasons, we cannot share names. We cannot share names. We have to.
Others he would have met with.
We cannot.
You can share names in regards to if someone came here in regards to the president.
We cannot share names of specialists broadly. From a dermatologist to a neurologist. We cannot share names. There are security reasons. We have to protect. I understand that. I hear you.
Right there for anyone to see.
Ed?
The frustration expressed by reporters in the room today is that Dr. Kennard's name appears on the public, internet available, you could search it yourself, White House visitor logs that show that he's been here 8 times. So when she suggests that there's a security concern for explaining why he was here, even though his name is in the public record and out there, that is where we got frustrated today regarding why it is she couldn't say one way or the other whether he'd met. And if the answer is, I don't know, so be it. Then the answer is, I don't know. So there's that issue. There's the other thing she said, which is important to point out, because this has been raised in recent days, and I'll just read it out to you. Has the president been treated for Parkinson's? No, she said. Is he being treated for Parkinson's? No, he's not. Is he taking medication for Parkinson's? No. All of those questions have been raised either publicly or quietly among Democrats, among reporters in recent days, amid concerns. Some medical professionals who've observed but never treated the president say there could be signs of this. She very clearly today, helpfully explained that no, that is not the case. None of that is happening. And when she says that he's had 3 neurological exams, that's a standard part of the annual presidential physical. His last one was on February 28th at Walter Reed National Medical Center. He'd had them in the previous years as well. And as the readouts from those physicals show, there was nothing to be concerned about in the neurological space, Caitlin.
Ed, good effort, at least trying to get some answers to those questions. Scott, Democrats are returning to Washington after a July 4th recess, and they are getting a lot of questions as well about the president's standing. Give us a lay of the land. I mean, I thought it was interesting that some lawmakers are kind of preemptively putting out statements knowing that they are going to be, of course, asked about all of this and whether he should stay in the race.
Oh, there's a whole Mars and Venus thing going on in Congress about this issue and with this reaction. Let me start with Venus, the U.S. Senate, where the more deliberative body in Congress has been particularly deliberative about this. Other than the president's top surrogates, Senator Chris Coons of Delaware, John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, senators are largely synchronized on the same message in the Democratic caucus. We want to see more. We want to hear more. They've been particularly effective through this day and this evening in keeping their powder dry. Take a listen to 2 of them. Joe Manchin, senator from West Virginia, the independent, and the senator from Delaware, the Democrat Tom Carper.
I've just sat back and I said, let's wait. Let's see, let it unfold, give it a couple weeks to mature. Whatever's going to happen will happen. The president has set a course of where he wants to go. I think he has earned that right. He has a heck of a legacy right now with all the service he has, and just give it time. I think this week is going to be a crucial time.
In a moment to talk about the Biden campaign.
No, I'm late.
Anything you want to say about whether the president should stay on the
ticket?
Thank
you for asking. I'm late and I'm in trouble.
2 very different styles in not answering the question directly of what should happen with President Biden. All right, that's Venus. Let's go over to Mars, the U.S. House. We now have a handful of House Democrats on the record saying the president should withdraw. Perhaps the one with the most heft or the highest rank is Adam Smith of Washington State, who began this evening telling CBS News he thinks the president has to get out of the race, that he's hurting the chances of keeping the White House. Adam Smith, top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, an institutionalist not known as a rabble-rouser. Then you have this growing number of House Democrats making statements that the president should very much stay in the race, that the party should align behind him. You just can't keep that type of schism in the party for too long. They're going to have to get in lockstep somehow in the U.S. House, or it'll be a political circular firing squad. It just is, as the Congress returns here, Caitlin, seems to be no progress in the House getting on the same page.
Yes, Scott, a long week to go, indeed. I mean, Ed, to that point, what is the president planning to do this week to try to reassure some of those Democrats who are continuing to raise some questions?
Well, it's not often, Caitlin, that this White House boasts about what the president's not only doing this week, but what he's already scheduled to do next week. And let's review that. Tomorrow begins the NATO summit, 75th anniversary of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and the president will host an event tomorrow evening to kick things off. Member nations, several Asian countries as well, will be here in attendance for those meetings. This is a real big moment for a president who spent so much of his Senate and vice presidential career, especially focused on foreign policy, to now get to play host to the 75th anniversary of what he calls the most important treaty organization in the world is a big feather in his cap and something he's going to relish this week, regardless of his domestic political troubles. On Friday, the day after he's set to hold a solo news conference at the end of the NATO summit, he's going to go campaign in Detroit. We don't know all the details of what exactly he'll be doing there in the Detroit area, but there's an event on the calendar regardless. Then next week, as the Republican convention begins in Milwaukee, the president's headed to Austin, Texas Monday to speak at the LBJ Library about the anniversary of passage of the Civil Rights Act, and then heads to Las Vegas for two events, one an NAACP event, the other hosted by Unidos US, which is a major Latino civil rights organization. And in all three instances, he will be speaking to the issues of civil rights, immigrant rights, and trying to win back what is softer than usual support among black and Latino voters for a Democratic president. All of it designed, Caitlin, to reiterate what the president and the first lady have said today in public, that he's not going anywhere.
And Scott, quickly, I mean, to Ed's point about the support from black voters in particular, it was interesting today to see a statement from the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus voicing his support for the president. I know we've talked about a lot of the dissenters on Capitol Hill today, but tell us about the significance of that statement and where members of that caucus stand.
Yeah, the White House has set up a Zoom call between the president and members of the Black Caucus, so that's potentially a campaign logistic that was worked out. It's important to note, Caitlin, 0 defections as Monday night began from the Congressional Black Caucus for President Biden. It is an enormous part of his political constituency at this moment.
A constituency he can't afford to lose this election. Ed O'Keefe and Scott McFarlane, thank you so much for covering both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue for us on this pivotal day. We appreciate it. And prosecutors say Senator Bob Menendez sold his power for gold bars, cash, and a Mercedes-Benz. Soon, a jury gets to decide his fate. We'll take a closer look next. You're streaming America Decides.
Coming up, our series. Wait a minute. Tom, is that you working the camera?
Keep leaning out of your close-up.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
That Desired Farm is a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Closing arguments in the federal corruption trial of Senator Bob Menendez began today, and they will continue tomorrow. The New Jersey lawmaker is accused of trading in political favors for gold bars and hundreds of thousands of dollars. He's charged with bribery, extortion, and acting as a foreign agent for Egypt. His wife, Nadine Menendez, has also been charged with offenses related to bribery, but she will be tried separately next month. Both have pleaded not guilty to all counts. Rebecca Royfee joins us now. Rebecca, good to see you. Thanks for being here. So let's talk about what the prosecutors have to convey to jurors during these closing arguments in order to try to win this case.
Nice to see you as well, Caitlin. Yes, so prosecutors have been using this line that Senator Menendez put power up for sale. And what they mean by that, what the proof they have to establish in order to make out this case is that he used his official position in exchange for hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of bribes. And those can be, in the form of these gold bars, cash, cars, favors. And so it's that actual exchange that the prosecutors will have to show in order to make out their case.
And what about the defense? What's their strategy been here?
The defense has offered a very different narrative. They have said that Senator Menendez was simply doing his job. He was delivering political results for his constituents, and that he was unaware of the money that was coming in largely to his wife. So they try to distance himself. They're trying to distance their client from the money that was coming in, which then makes it look as if these things that he did that were supposedly in exchange for them were simply the work of a senator, what he was doing for his constituents every single day.
And we know that Senator Menendez has chosen not to testify. I'm wondering, is that surprising to you? What do you think of that move? Is it a smart move?
Yeah, I mean, it's not surprising. It is rare that a defendant takes the stand. It happens sometimes, but it happens very rarely. And that's because it's an extremely risky move. And that's because, of course, the prosecution bears the burden of proof. They have to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. And it is not easy in a case like this to do so. And I think the prosecution has established a good case, but the defense has won some points by poking holes in that case, and that it is a safer strategy to rely on those holes, the cross-examination that they have engaged in with the prosecution's witnesses, rather than try to put their client on the stand where it could either, go in their favor or really, really blow up in their faces.
And if viewers think that Menendez has been in the spotlight for some time, they're right to think that, because this case is happening some years after a mistrial was declared in that separate corruption case against the senator. I'm curious if that might factor into this trial at all.
Well, it really doesn't, in a direct way, but of course it does in other ways. I mean, first of all, it shows exactly what I was saying, which is, it is hard to prove these sorts of cases. And that is because, a smart person who is taking bribes does not leave his fingerprints all over those bribes, and making it possible for the defense to make an argument that these weren't bribes at all. These were just, money coming into his wife that he was completely unaware of, and, political acts that he was engaged in. So the earlier case, I think, just gives us a roadmap for how these cases go, rather than play in directly, because of course this is a retrial. It's not exactly the same. The facts are not exactly the same. And of course, we have an entirely separate, different jury.
And speaking of the jury, once they do begin deliberations, do we have any sense of how long that might last?
We really don't. I mean, it's like reading tea leaves to try to figure that out. It really depends on how the jurors go into that room. So if they go into that room with a very similar mindset, a very similar sense of where they want to come out, then sometimes the resolution can be extremely quick. But there are other times in which there is, a group that feels one way, or one juror that feels a different way. And when that happens, we tend to see a longer deliberation. Sometimes there are notes that are sent out to the judge for, reading of testimony that will help to clarify and hopefully bring about unanimity among this group.
All right, we will stay tuned to be sure. Rebecca Roiphe, as always, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Caitlin.
And celebrations and shock in France as the far right's rise suffers an unexpected blow. Why the election outcome could put the country in political paralysis. You're streaming America Decides.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate. Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing, bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else. This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app. Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
And lawmakers here in Washington are used to political gridlock. Now, a similar type of paralysis could be on the horizon for a major ally across the Atlantic. That's France. A left-wing alliance beat back a far-right surge, winning the most seats in snap legislative elections yesterday. President Emmanuel Macron's centrist coalition came in second, but no party came close to reaching a majority in the National Assembly. Elaine Cobb joins us now from Paris on what we can expect next. Elaine, good to see you. So how much concern is there for political paralysis in the country because of these results?
Caitlin, because no one party or alliance managed to form the absolute majority needed to form a government, we are looking at some kind of coalition. And there is real concern about the state of the country afterwards. Some say France might be ungovernable because some of the potential coalitions are among parties who came together during these elections purely to block the far right and the far left. And so they don't all have the same ideologies, they don't have the same aims, they don't have the same policies. So there's a lot of concern about exactly how this can work. And of course, we're going to see a lot of alliances being built and broken this week as they come together and try to work out who can govern France.
And what does this mean for President Macron?
Well, he has been weakened by this because in calling the snap elections, his own party, which had a relative majority but was in government, is now out of government and will have to rely on some other parties if they want to govern again. He has, for the moment, decided to leave his current outgoing Prime Minister Gabriel Attal in place and asked him to keep a caretaker administration for the stability of the country. So that gives him a bit of breathing room, but he will be in cohabitation, as the French call it, with whoever forms a government. And that's always a bit difficult in France. It means that there'll always be a tussle or compromise or negotiation over anything that they want to do.
And, you know, obviously news reached over here. President Biden touched on the results today in a phone interview with MSNBC earlier today. Let's take a listen.
You know, on Europe, the polls are wrong in France. They're also right, there's no right wave or tide here in America either.
So what kind of impact could this gridlock that we could see in France have on the country's relationship with the United States and the rest of Europe?
I think the relationship with the United States, given that it's a presidential election year in the U.S., will not be hugely impacted. Everyone has domestic issues in mind. But I think the relationship with Europe will be seriously impacted. Germany and France are the traditional power couple in Europe, and they lead policy. And Germany has been embroiled in domestic issues for the last several months, and so France has been picking up the slack. So now other countries in Europe are looking and saying, well, if France is also going to be dealing with domestic issues all the time, who's going to keep their eye on the ball for the EU? And it is something that the neighboring countries are concerned about.
All right, critical elections happening across the world this year. And Elaine Cobb, we're so grateful for your reporting. Thank you so much. And some Pennsylvania Democrats are standing by President Biden. Our political panel weighs in next. You're streaming America Decides.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail.
What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
an original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discovery, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
This is the conversation I'm proud to have between now and November, because that's our guy, and that's the way it's going to stay.
Take a look at what has been accomplished under this president. And I can tell you close up and personally, the contrast couldn't be greater.
I trust Joe Biden with my daughter's future. So what we need to do as Democrats, we need to not worry, we need to work.
Welcome back to America Decides. You just heard from several lawmakers in Pennsylvania who still say President Biden has what it takes to win this November. Let's bring on our political panel to discuss Ashley Etienne and Hogan Gidley. Ashley served as communications director for Vice President Kamala Harris, and Hogan was the White House deputy press secretary for the Trump administration and was also on the former president's 2020 campaign. Two people who I couldn't be more excited to talk to on this monumental day, it seems. Ashley, I want to start with you because we heard from those lawmakers there in Pennsylvania, obviously key swing state for the president's reelection chances. You heard that support, but the dissent is growing on Capitol Hill. So how do Democrats possibly make the case to voters that they should show up for Joe Biden when Democrats are saying that they have a lot of reservations about him?
Well, I mean, I always think that it matters who. You know, not all members, I hate to say this, are made equally, and not every member's objection should be weighed the same as others. What I mean by that is if you see defections among the frontline members, those who are in those seats where they could potentially lose, that weighs heavier in the consideration for the president than a random member who's in a safe seat, if that makes any sense. So for me, I caution looking at the number, rather what's most important is who is defecting and who do they bring with them. If you're ahead of a caucus, for example, that could be a problem, or frontline members. But now it feels like the president is coalescing his support, that he's consolidating most of his support. Just today, I'm hearing that the CBC is standing firm with the president, the biggest caucus within, the biggest body within the Democratic caucus right now, a key constituency that the president needs to come out and vote and actually win the next election. So that seems to be going well. But I will just say one thing, if you don't mind me adding this, is the president did send a letter up to Congress. I'm sure we're going to get into that. Yeah. He was really forceful in that letter, saying he's in it to win it. You know, don't overlook him. Let's not, any distraction from that is a win for Trump and not for the Democratic Party. But the one thing I'm hearing from members is the letter's not enough. Like, it's nice, it's somewhat stop the bleeding, but they need to touch and feel Joe Biden. They need to see him in person in order to know and feel secure that he actually can do the job. So that's what I'm hearing from members now. They like the letter, but it's not enough. Yeah, and you're hearing that as they're coming back to Washington today and putting out some statements saying that they need to hear more from him. Hogan, Donald Trump seems to be following a political rule this week, which is when your opponent is flailing, let them kind of flail, essentially. We haven't really seen or heard from former President Trump since the day after the debate. He's expected to have a rally tomorrow in Florida. But what's the strategy there? What do you make of his kind of, standing to the side here?
Yeah, well, I think you hit on it, and everyone understands that. That's kind of a rule in politics. When your opponent is messing up,
let them mess up. And Joe Biden clearly has some problems here within his own party and his own caucus. And you're absolutely right, Ashley. I mean, you can see people coming out of the woodwork saying Joe Biden should not be the nominee. He doesn't need to go forward with this. But I've long said I don't think that's a strategy that's going to work. I think you're going to see stalwarts like Nancy Pelosi, who you've already seen, Chuck Schumer and others come out and say, no, he's our guy. Now Fetterman is saying he's our guy. You may not know this, but elected officials care about one thing first, and that's getting reelected. And a lot of folks out there who are concerned about their own reelection may be trying to push Joe Biden to the side. I mean, John Tester, for heaven's sakes, is running ads against Joe Biden. That was even before the debate performance that was so bad. So a lot of people are worried about their own political future, which I think is a lot of the impetus for coming out and saying Joe Biden should move to the side.
Yeah, you remember I worked for Nancy Pelosi, and there were a lot of objections to her. Yeah. And she would always say, listen, say what you need to say about me, but just win. Just come back as a winner because we need to maintain and keep the body. And I think that's where you'll see some of these Democrats that can't sort of, they're going to have to object to Joe Biden in the interest of winning, and to some degree that might be okay for him.
I mean, you mentioned this letter, Ashley, and we have it here. I mean, Biden was really defiant in this letter and kind of calling anybody, criticizing him as part of the elite. Is that really the way to go here? I mean, the calls are coming from inside the House, really.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think what really concerns me more than anything else, and, this is sort of probably a little provocative for me to say, but, if we are to believe what the president said, that it's an episodic and it's not a condition, then we should be anticipating that another episode will happen again. And, and the challenge there is that it could be more catastrophic, or it could be at a time when we have no more time left on the clock. And so that's the risk that we're running. And so that's really what the president has to convince not just the Democratic Party and the members, but the donor class as well as the grassroots that he's worth taking that risk.
And how is Trump kind of playing this? I mean, they clearly want to run against Biden.
Sure. Well, I mean, look, I think Trump would obviously say whoever it is, he's going to be just fine because the policies matter most to the American people. But the catch-22 here on the left is clear. They want him out more, so you can see how great he is. The problem is a lot of people close to him have prevented him from going out because they're afraid, as Ashley said, it is episodic and you will see another episode. Trump, on the other hand, is sitting there going, wait, we have a big convention coming up. We want to stick the landing here. We don't want to make an announcement of a VP or anything too soon because we want to let them continue to flail around on the left and try and find their footing. This has been one of the worst news cycles I've ever seen, especially for someone on the left as it relates to their arguments with the press. That briefing today was brutal. It got hot in a hurry. And she even yelled at a lot of folks. I think one of your colleagues at CBS. It was fascinating to watch her implode like that.
I mean, to that point, though, do you think, your conversations with Trump and the campaign, are they watching how this plays out to make any decisions about who they're going to choose for their running mate?
Well, I think right now, from everything I understand, they're prepared for a lot of the eventualities that are being floated around in the media, whether it be pushing Joe Biden aside and allowing the vice president to take the lead, whether they bring in somebody else, a Gavin Newsom or someone. I think they're preparing for a lot of those different things. Tough to do, obviously, because you don't know what's going to eventually happen. But I do think all this settles over the next several weeks, and I think Joe Biden maintains some strength and some power on the Democrat base, and they go with him for better or worse all the way to November.
And just quickly, Ashley, is that your assumption as well?
Absolutely. I think the other outstanding question is because NATO's here, the president's engaging with world leaders, where are they going to come out over the next week? Are they going to come out in the next couple of days and support the president in a very robust way? If I were working in the White House, I'd be working the phones to try to get some of these leaders to come out and endorse the president. I mean, you got to utilize the moment that you have and really kind of bring everybody together and bolster the president. So that's what I'm going to be watching as well.
Yeah, the world quite literally watching this week to see what happens.
And here in town.
Exactly. Ashley and Hogan, we have plenty more to discuss, and we will continue to do it over the next few months. Thank you so much for being here, guys.
Thanks.
And doing double duty. As the president defends his 2024 campaign, he gets set to welcome world leaders to Washington for that high-stakes NATO summit we were just talking about. You're streaming America Decides.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. and reach for the stars.
Here we are. Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun. But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
I'm open to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Nations are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back. We have some unfortunate news to share with you. California Congressman John Garamendi has cancer. The California Democrat said today that he began treatment for early-stage multiple myeloma. It's a form of treatable blood cancer. He said he knows he will get through this while, quote, continuing to serve my constituents and advance American democracy. Meanwhile, world leaders are arriving in the United States here in Washington today ahead of a 3-day NATO summit. Leaders from NATO's 32 member countries, as well as several allies of the alliance, are gathering in Washington to mark 75 years since NATO was formed. During today's White House briefing, National Security Communications Advisor John Kirby indirectly slammed former President Donald Trump while defending President Biden's work with the alliance.
Rather than browbeaten and insulting and demeaning allies, this president has invested in allies and partnerships. The president's record speaks for itself, and the allies and the non-NATO friends and partners that are coming as well, they know that. They wouldn't be coming. New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, to a NATO summit if they didn't believe in American leadership and how important it is, and if they didn't believe that President Biden takes that responsibility extremely seriously.
And our Major Garrett is with me now in our D.C. studio. Major, good to see you. So 75th anniversary of NATO, that would have been a big headline in and of itself. Of course, though, all eyes are on the president, his condition, and these growing calls from within his own party to step aside from the ticket. How do you assess what the president has to do here with all these world leaders this week?
What was meant to be a celebration, 75 years of NATO, launched in Washington, D.C. 75 years ago. So it's a kind of a full circle moment in the history of the alliance, is overshadowed by the president's political difficulties and what will inevitably be, Caitlin, persistent questions to world leaders and those traveling in their retinue. What do you think about Biden? How does he look to you? What is his firmness or capabilities as you've seen them in the 3.5 years of his presidency? Those stories are going to engulf this entire celebratory atmosphere, plus deliberations about what exactly will become the future of Ukraine and NATO.
Yeah.
What is a bridge? What does that mean? Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? And what will the alliance do to help the Ukrainians not only survive this summer, but prepare for what appears to be an inevitable and brutal winter, with power system generation failing in Ukraine because of persistent Russian missile and artillery attacks? How does Ukraine carry on credibly, militarily, and hold its country together against the ongoing Russian onslaught, intensified even in the last 48 hours by more than 3 dozen civilian deaths? So all of that is part of this, but Biden is central to this, but in ways he was not expecting to be central to it. And I've been talking to Democratic lawmakers over the weekend, and they say, look, don't talk about Biden, don't criticize, don't get disunified. You'll overtake the NATO summit. They're like, hey, the NATO summit's already overtaken. That's inevitable because of the debate performance. So you have something that is a freestanding event, all planned. The communique's largely been written. Much of what the alliance is going to say has already been predetermined. But that thrust will be interrupted by all of the president's other side political problems.
Yeah, and I know we've said a lot this year, and in political years, the stakes are high. Of course, this is an instance where the world is quite literally watching how Biden's going to do. And the White House said today he's going to have a press conference around the NATO summit. Obviously, big spotlight on him for lots of reasons that you just described. But in your conversations with Democrats, how are they kind of looking to how he handles that moving forward?
There's this great conversation. By great, I mean consequential. Democrats don't know what to do. They have two realities. One, the president doesn't want to budge. And two, DNC rules that will oversee the Democratic National Convention allow him to stay if he doesn't want to budge. So those are two facts. The great conversation is, what do we do about those facts? Because anxiety about the president's ability not only to articulate the message, to carry the fight to Donald Trump, but to rebound in places that everyone knows are going to be close, the 7 battlegrounds, but also restore Democratic prospects in places that looked 3 weeks ago pretty secure. Virginia, New Hampshire, Minnesota. If those are on the map, that is dreadful for Democrats. They can't have those states on the map. They need to reassess, and they're trying to reassess, and say to the president, are you the best person at this moment? Biden says, guess what, I am. They have doubts, but they don't know how to translate those doubts into action. And so you have a lot of inaction and a lot of people talking on cable television, a lot of frantic text messages going back and forth, but not much else. And if all you got is cable news and text messages, you're not going to dislodge a sitting president who wants to be renominated and has twice as many delegates as he needs.
And is completely dug in, as we've seen from his comments today. I want to talk about Donald Trump because uncharacteristically for him, he has kind of been, taking the back seat and letting this news cycle play out. Of course, that rule in politics, let your opponent kind of suffer if they are. But when it comes to NATO, I mean, he's famously been critical of NATO, famously been critical of our allies not paying enough into the alliance. How does that kind of factor into how the world leaders are kind of thinking about this heading into this summit?
So when President Biden, in one of the exchanges that was not hampered by his otherwise poor performance at the debate, asked former President Trump a question. Will you get out of NATO? And Trump shrugged. No answer. Now, I've covered NATO summits where President Trump was there, and I saw him hector and cajole and insult, but not in a vacuum. Those harsh words did send some of those nations sort of back to their budget books, and they did meet the 2% gross domestic product threshold on defense spending. But those numbers have increased under Biden's administration. So if that was Trump's real concern about NATO, he ought to, broadly speaking, be celebrating what's happened. More NATO countries than ever. 23 of 32 are now at that 2% number, which is a vast improvement. It improved under Trump. It improved ever so slightly under Obama when this actual hectoring really began. Robert Gates, the defense secretary under President Obama, set this all in motion. But it's gotten better consistently. Trump should celebrate that. You don't hear anything about that. And that shrug at the debate sort of encapsulated in a personal way his indifference toward the NATO alliance, which, while they're talking about Biden, they're also going to be talking to themselves while they're here. Oh my gosh, is it going to be Trump? And if so, how do we protect NATO? How do we protect Europe from either that indifference or that sort of Putin-friendly, low-level hostility? That's the other conversation that will be going on this week here.
Well, we will be paying attention to how world leaders are being asked and what they say. 2 questions about the current president as well. Major Garrett, thank you, as always, for your time and reporting. The Gaza Health Ministry says dozens have been killed over the last 24 hours in new Israeli attacks. These strikes are coming just days after our own Holly Williams saw firsthand the devastation in the southern Gaza city of Rafah.
Israel launched a ground offensive in Rafah in May, despite the objections of the US. On Wednesday, for the first time, Israel's military took foreign journalists to the city on Gaza's border with Egypt to see what it's accomplished there.
We're now inside the Gaza Strip. Rafah City is straight ahead.
Israel said it had to go into Rafah because Hamas's 4 remaining battalions were hiding there, using tunnels connected to Egypt to smuggle in weapons. Israel's military claims it's killed more than 900 militants in the city, though it's also killed civilians, exactly what the US was worried about.
Israel's military says that we are standing above a terror ecosystem, a web of tunnels that were used by the militants. But above ground, all we can see is destruction on a scale that is really impossible to adequately describe. So I'm going to let my cameraman do the work. I'm going to let the pictures do the talking. This is a wasteland. The only people that we're seeing are Israeli soldiers.
Hamas leaders are still at large, according to Israel's military.
Do you know what's happening? Why is there all this gunfire?
Those gunfires are part of outgoing gunfire. We are in a war zone. This is protecting the area.
As an Israeli, how do you feel about the fact that so many Americans are now condemning what Israel is doing in Gaza?
I think it's something that we need to be better in, explaining ourselves to the world.
Shortly after that, we were told to move. If peace does finally come to Gaza, this shattered strip of land will need to be rebuilt from the ground up.
And as questions swirl around President Biden's candidacy, Jill Biden steps up on the campaign trail. What the First Lady is saying to supporters. You're streaming America Decides.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that? Why won't you say the word crisis?
You're not answering my question.
This really
is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean?
What does that mean in
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
What happened?
Why?
It's time for the CBS News Original 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has that glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh, really good.
Is it good? Mm-hmm. Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
So if we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party? Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
When people say who's first to get in the morning, that would be me. Morning news matters because it sets the tone for your day, and it's a way of getting you started.
Day to day, that first draft of history, it happens right here.
We're going to uplift you. We're going to send you out your way.
We take you places, we teach you new things, and we make you feel like, you know, it's not all bad.
People say to me, you always seem to be having a good time. And you know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
And welcome back to America Decides. As the number of Democrats calling on President Biden to step aside grows, the First Lady is stepping up her role on the campaign trail. Jill Biden began her day in North Carolina, where 16 electoral votes are up for grabs. Former President Trump won the state in 2016 and in 2020. Florida and Georgia were also on today's schedule. So let's bring in our Shauna Mizell, who is following the First Lady in North Carolina. Shauna, good to see you on the ground there. What do we hear from First Lady Jill Biden today on the campaign trail?
Caitlin, good evening. First Lady Jill Biden was here in Wilmington, North Carolina to kick off the Biden campaign's initiative that is centered around military veterans and families. But this visit from the First Lady here today obviously comes on the heels of President Biden's debate performance, which he even conceded was a bad performance. So let's take a listen to what the First Lady had to say today.
As Commander-in-Chief, President Biden wakes up every morning ready to work for you. That's what this election is all about. You. For all the talk out there about this race, Joe has made it clear that he's all in.
So the First Lady making it clear that the president decided to stay in the race even in the aftermath of his bad debate performance, and making it clear that she's sticking beside him. But she also had some pointed words for former President Donald Trump as she launched this initiative for military families, saying that he cannot be trusted to uphold the Constitution and that members of the military need a leader and a commander-in-chief with integrity like her husband, she said.
And Shauna, you know, obviously the campaign is saying that they are sticking with it, that the president is not backing down. But I know you've been talking to voters too. What have they been saying about the president?
Well, many of the voters that I spoke to here today were, of course, at this Biden campaign event, and they are sticking beside him as well. But one woman in particular said that she does not think that Biden should participate in another debate against Donald Trump. She said he only stands to lose ground from that. She was questioning how he was prepped for that debate, and she said that even though she's not sure that Biden would make it through another 4 years, she said the main point is just reelecting him and beating Donald Trump. Caitlin?
That's a significant acknowledgement from voters questioning whether he would make it through the next 4 years. That's really interesting, Shauna. I'm curious kind of how we might see the First Lady, whether we might see her take on a bigger role on the campaign trail in light of all of this. Give us a sense of what her schedule is like the rest of this week.
It seems like it. Today is certainly going to be a very busy day for the First Lady. Dr. Biden started her day heading to North Carolina. She will be in Florida and Georgia as well. And this is all a part of the Biden campaign effort to highlight their new initiative geared at military families and veterans. So Jill Biden here today mentioning Beau Biden, the late son of the president who served in the military, but also mentioning that she's the daughter of a World War II veteran. So we'll definitely see the First Lady on the campaign trail more often as the months ahead come.
All right, our Shauna Mizell on the ground for us. Thank you very much. And that does it for us today, but we'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report with John Dickerson starts right now.
Welcome to the Daily Report for July 8th, 2024. I'm John Dickerson. Joe Biden is trying to close the door on talk about making him take the exit, pointing the finger at elites in a party which gets the larger share of wealthy and well-educated voters.